In this video, I'll show you how I make my own sculpting tools, cheap and easy. So let's get to the cheap and easy part. Hello and welcome back to Small Soldier and another 10-minute tips and techniques. As I stated in the intro, we'll take a look at how I make my own sculpting tools and how you can make your own sculpting tools with some really simple techniques that will give you as good, if not better, results than buying some of these tools commercially. Firstly, let's take a look at some commercially available sculpting tools. Here I have a variety of different shapes and materials used in making these tools. The first are these metal dental tools, and I picked these up from my dentist, and they come in handy for a lot of different applications, especially when I'm sculpting things that are a little more stiff or rigid. These will really make a difference and cut into the surfaces a lot easier. Now, my dentist won't give me these tools anymore.
Yeah, and you're an anti-dentite.
As he says he recycles them and he gets money back on them. I'm not sure about your dentist in your area, and that may be the case. You may have to buy these if you want the metal sculpting tools. I'm not sure. You'll have to check with your dentist and see what he'll do for you. The next are bits from a Dremel tool or a Proxon tool, which I have, and they are silicone. As you can see, they're bendy. They have either a rounded tip like this or more of a sharp tip like that, and they can work well for sculpting or pushing putties around, but these tend to be quite pricey, so if you're on a budget, I would say these are probably not the ones you want to go for. And finally, we have some artist silicone tipped brushes, and these are great and very convenient to use. As you can see, they're soft and spongy, yet rigid enough that they will work to push putties around, and the nice thing is putty and clays don't really stick to these. You already have that advantage. They are silicone, as I said earlier, and you can see there's different shapes and profiles of these sculpting tools. But again, these are quite pricey, so if you're on a budget and you want this type of material for sculpting, I'm going to show you exactly how to make silicone tip brushes like this. And we'll also take a look at some of the tools I make myself out of dowels or ends of paint brushes. Really, any type of wooden dowel or stick will work. So let's get on with it, and I'll show you exactly how we make these items. So these are some of the tools and materials you'll need to make the wooden dowel sculpting tools. As you can see, I have different types of woods here. This is just a takeout chopstick you would get with any takeout meal from a Chinese restaurant. This is part of a bamboo skewer, and I like them because they're flexible yet stiff enough that they're easy to carve with. And the final one here is a cuticle pusher that you can get in any beauty section in your local drugstore or food store. Now, depending on what you're using these for and how large you're sculpting, that will determine the size of dowel that you need. If you need something that you need to put a lot of pressure on, you're going to want something a little bigger like this. If it's more fine and delicate, let's say you're sculpting 1/35th scale figures or 1/16th scale figures, that size dowel is probably more what you want. You're going to want to get into tight areas with the tool, and the smaller dowels will work better for that. The nice thing about the cuticle pushers is they already have a shaped pointed end on them and a shaped wedge end as well, so you can use that to your advantage, and you may not even have to do a lot of sculpting if you wanted those two shapes, because they're there for you already. But I'll show you how I make these so they're as smooth as glass and won't leave any imprints in the work that you're doing. And then of course you need some sort of sanding materials like sanding sticks or sandpaper. A tea candle is always a good thing for putting your CA glue into. If you've watched any of my other videos, you'll have seen this already. CA glue, for some reason, doesn't like to dry up inside a tea candle. So if you want your CA glue to last longer, using photo etch or whatever you're doing, put it in a tea candle, and you'll thank me later. And then you can also use some quick set flash accelerator for your super glue if you don't want to wait for it to dry. And then of course you'll need a hobby knife or some sort of cutting implement like this. So the first thing you'll need to determine is what shape you're looking to sculpt. So now that you've determined what shape you want, it's just a matter of taking your hobby knife and whittling that down to the right size and dimension. You could also do this with a motor tool, but I find a motor tool or a Dremel tool can be a little unpredictable, and you can whittle away too much, or you may ruin the shape you're trying to get with a tool like that. I just like to do this by hand. I find it just as easy, and I can kind of get that finesse feel when I'm sculpting something that has to be precise. As you can see, I've just whittled that edge down, and I'm going to take the back end of my knife and just smooth that out a bit. And as you can see here, it's kind of broken. So all I'm going to do is just take my hobby knife and I'll cut away that area. So once you get that, take a rougher, coarse sanding file or whatever like this. File that down flat, and then with something a little finer, just give it a sand. And there you go, it's as simple as that. The next step is to take your dowel and your CA glue, and I'll just take some CA glue with the back end of it's just a Q-tip, and you want to coat that whole surface, just like this, front and back. I usually coat it up to about halfway on the dowel, and the reason I like using this is because it's nice and smooth, and you want to try and keep that surface as smooth as possible. So once you get that, you can add accelerator if you want to, but I find I prefer to let this air dry, just because if you use accelerator, it can kind of give the super glue a texture or make it lumpy. So it's better to let this air dry totally on its own. You'll get much better results. So we'll come back after a few minutes and I'll show you what it looks like.
5 minutes later.
Alright, now that the super glue has had a chance to dry, I did take a hairdryer to it, which will speed up the dry time. So if you're impatient, you want to get it going quicker, use a hairdryer. Just go over that area where you've put the super glue, and you want to take down all the fibers, because what happens is when you put the super glue on, it sort of acts like a thick varnish, and what that'll do is it's going to raise up the hairs a little bit on the wood. If you're a woodworker, you know what I mean. When you put a varnish or a clear coat over wood, it does bring the hairs up off the wood, and you have to sand that back and then add more layers of varnish later. So it's the same thing with this. So once you get that sanded down and it's nice and smooth, I'll go back in with another layer of CA glue and coat that whole thing again. And once you've got that second coat on there, you want to dry it off. And here I'm just going to use this hair dryer for a minute and we'll dry it up. Whew, that's hot. Now that it's dry again, you're going to take the smoother side of your sanding stick and sand all that back again. Let's give it a little buff with the buffing side of the sanding stick. You end up with this type of thing. And I'll usually do about 3 or 4 coats of super glue before the sculpting tool is complete. So that's how I make my wood sculpting tools. Let's take a look at how I make the silicone tipped sculpting tools next. Okay, here are the sculpting tools I made out of silicone, and these are really simple, and I'm going to show you exactly the product I used to do this and how I did it. And as you can see, they're flexible, and I've just adhered them to a dowel. Make sure the dowel doesn't have a coating on it though. You want like a raw piece of wood so that the silicone will stick and adhere to it. So this is the material I used to create those silicone tips. You can use any silicone putty, doesn't matter what brand it is. This is actually for making molds, and all it is 2 tubs like this. And as you can see, you want to have similar sized balls, just like you were mixing up epoxy putty or any other type of putty. And then you just mix it all together and get a uniform color. There's the putty we're going to use for the sculpting tool, and I'll show you what we're going to do next. Okay, the next step is to take your dowel or toothpick, and you just want to place that putty on the end of the dowel and kind of work it into the wood so that it's going to stick and embed itself. And then from there, you're just going to start shaping it. It's 25 minutes to cure, but the actual manipulation of the material is about 10 minutes. Yeah, there you go. It's simple, easy, anyone can do it. So why don't we take a look at how these can be applied in a sculpting situation. This is the putty that I like to use when I'm sculpting. It's Aves Epoxy Sculpt. And you can pretty much find this anywhere online or in most hobby stores. And again, like the other putty, it's just 2 parts like this of equal size, and I just smash that together. Alright, once your putty is mixed up, I like to just set it off to the side somewhere. And we'll just be using Igor here, as I like to call him.
You must be Igor.
No, it's pronounced Igor.
He's just a resin copy of a base sculpt I made. It's basically a head blank. And as you can see, there's no eyes, there's really no mouth, the ears are carved away for the most part. I find, you know, why reinvent the wheel every time you go to sculpt something, make a casting, and then you've got 50% of your work already done for you. You've got the basic shape of the head and the proportions are all fairly correct. It's just a matter of adding those details and personality to the figure. So now we'll just take a look at some of these sculpting tools and how I use them when I'm sculpting. To apply the putty, I might just want to take this round dowel, and let's say we wanted to add some hair to this figure. A little bit of water to kind of set it in place. So you can see by using this sculpting tool I made here, it's great because I can smooth things out, I can roll it, I can manipulate it, creating different shapes. So if, like I said, if I was sculpting a hairline here, I can get a rough shape with my wooden dowel tool, and they're super easy to clean, as you can see. I'm just going to take that over a paper towel and it is clean, and that's all because of the super glue layer that's on there. That prevents the putty from sticking to the dowel. Now if I wanted to take a silicone smoother to it, I just add a little water to that, and I can go in and use the silicone tool as sort of a brush, and I can just smooth out those areas and do a beautiful smooth transition right into the previous area that I sculpted. And then I also like to use a paintbrush sometimes, and that will give you another way of doing a final feather. So you're feathering that wet putty back into the area that you've previously worked on. And then make sure to always clean those tools, right? You don't want hardened putty on any of these tools, because then it kind of ruins their whole effect. So now that I've added that, I can use this wedge tool to go in and add hair texture. So you could do undercuts like this with it. You know, lay it back down, flatten it, add some more like that, and I'll push in those textures like so. Clean those tools, and then smooth it out with your brush to create more of a natural look to the hair. So, you know, this is just quick. It would take me many hours to actually produce a whole head, but you get the idea, right? Let's say I wasn't totally happy with the skull shape here. I can go back in before this putty's totally dry. It's been drying for about an hour, and let's say I wanted the temple to be a little more indented, possibly, if I don't have the shape of that skull quite right. And then you can use the glove to add a little water if you want. Use the silicone sculpting tool to smooth that transition back out again. And you can see also these silicone tools clean up perfect with a little bit of water, and they're good to go every time. Again, if I want to change the shape with this tool here, I could go in and you see how slippery that is, right? It just slid right off the surface. I could go in and add indentations. I don't know, maybe this guy's an alien, who knows? To create a nice soft transition in the putty. And you wouldn't be able to do that with a toothpick, of course, because it would be too harsh. And as you can see, it creates a nice round look to the impressions that I've created here. So anyway, you get the idea of what you can do here. There's all sorts of ways you can use these homemade sculpting tools. And again, they're cheap. You can make hundreds of these silicone tip brushes, any shape you want, any size, like you see here. Again, same thing with the wooden dowels. Any shape, any size you want. It's just a matter of spending the time and creating these tools. Well, that'll do it for this one. I hope you found it useful and maybe even learned a thing or two, or at least found it entertaining. It has been a while since my last video, and I really appreciate all your support and patience. So if you like this video, I really appreciate you consider subscribing to my channel. Hit the bell icon. That way you'll always be notified whenever I upload a video. Also, like and share. This lets YouTube know that you guys like my videos, and YouTube will recommend them to others just like you. So that's it for me. See you in the next one.